next up, I don't want to give too much away, but our next presenter will be cracking the whip. Nora Paul is the director for the New Media Studies Institute at the University of Minnesota. She's also a former faculty member here at the Poynter Institute, so she's one of our familiar faces. Her expertise lies in digital game development, innovative storytelling, strategy, and that's why she's here. And ABC.com also, they referred to you as one of the top people in tech, top women in tech.
Oh, long time ago when tech was really still just analog. No.
So Nora, you have great perspective on what the future of journalism is. What is the future of journalism?
Yes, the future of journalism is going to be built on the foundation of the past. Okay? And in that spirit, I'd like you to indulge me, please. If you would, if you've got your phone, put it in your pocket. Your computer, close it up, put it under your seat. Okay, we're going old school here. Regina has some pens and little Post-it notes. If I say anything the least bit tweet-worthy, and I certainly hope I do, I hope you will write it down and you can post it to tweet. None of it will be mission critical. It won't be breaking news. So you can post it after I talk in about 10, 15 minutes. Okay? Anyone need... Okay, good. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. Good afternoon. It's great to be back here at Poynter. And I want to say that one of the things I was really thrilled by being asked to come to this was that it was on the focus of the future of journalism, not the future of news. Too often the future of news kind of devolves into this discussion of whether newspapers are a viable business. What's the business model? So I'm really glad that we're talking about the focus being journalism. I'll tell you why. Clay Shirky said very astutely, society doesn't need newspapers. What society needs is journalism. So I think it's very important in any discussion of the future to refer to the past. You would agree with that, right, Roy? Mm-hmm. Okay, okay. So Lord Byron, very smart old guy, dead guy, he said the best prophet of the future is the past. Now, there's a couple of different meanings that this little simple statement could actually be referring to. When I don't understand something, first thing I do, of course, is go to the crowd. So I went online to Yahoo Answers, and actually Gen C had already beat me to it 4 years ago. She asked, the best prophet of the future is the past. What does this quote mean? So Elizabeth apparently got the best answer. Of course, it was only one vote, and I bet Elizabeth voted for herself. Stuffed the ballot box. But I think the better answer was actually Lily. Lily C here, or Lily 2. She said, you don't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. Okay? And I think that that's why I want to introduce you to Frank Premack. Okay? Frank was a journalist who, in his 17 years at the Minneapolis Tribune, was started off as a copy editor, went to Tribune reporter, assistant city editor, then he was the city editor, and then he ended up being the assistant managing editor for special projects. Now, Frank was a very complex man, respected and feared, both by the newsroom he ran as the editor and the people that he reported on. But the reason I decided to channel Frank today in this talk about the future is based on this one bit of wisdom, this one pre-Mackism that is often repeated by those who worked with him, and I'd like to share that piece of wisdom with you now. Frank was known for actually jumping up on the city desk, pulling out the whip that his city desk clerk bought for him, and I can do it very well. I'm afraid I'll put my eye out. Okay. He'd say, get your asses out on the street. There are no stories in here. Okay? Yeah, thank you. Frank would be happy about that. So, is there any question why, and doesn't he look cute with a beard? Men look better with beards, right? Okay, is there any reason why I kind of have a crush on this this journalist who's been dead now for more than 36 years. I will say in advance that he does absolutely represent the kind of heritage that Rachel is said very astutely that we're still fighting. He was definitely the old school newsroom, but I still think he's got some good words of wisdom for us. Okay, Frank, okay. I got a new assignment at the University of Minnesota last year. I had been running the Institute for New Media Studies for 10 years, and we folded it in with the Minnesota Journalism Center, which has been running for a very long time. And so I run that now. It's the professional outreach center for the school. And one of the signature programs that the Minnesota Journalism Center has been doing for the past 34 years, 35 years now, is the Frank Premack Awards. First one was held in April of 1978. The program started in '78 as a memorial event for Frank Premack, who had died of a heart attack 3 years earlier at the age of 43. I'd been to the events over the years, but knew very little about the man about whom these awards were named. That kind of changed this past summer. Those of you in academia know that summertime is when you actually get to do some real work of your own. So I spent the summer trying to figure out more about this man, Frank Premack, and what it was about him that inspired an eclectic group to establish this reporting award in his name. I say it was eclectic because it was not just his newsroom colleagues and friends that set up the award. It was also some of the politicians and lawyers and other influential Minnesota movers and shakers that came together, even though they were the ones that Frank often reported on, mostly to their discomfort. So over the summer, here's what I learned about Frank. In his eulogy that he gave at Frank's memorial, his reporting partner, Frank Wright, they like to call themselves Frank Right and Frank Wrong, said Frank had just two standards as a newspaperman. The first was truth. Only when he could not find the truth would he settle for accuracy. Frank's second standard was excellence. He applied it severely to everyone around him in the news business, and woe to any who seemed to him to be performing their task less well than they should and who were damaging the quality of the product in the process. So Frank was a very rabid reporter. He was renowned for his reporting technique. Even competing journalists were admirers. Jim Klobuchar, who was the columnist for the Minneapolis Star, which was the afternoon paper. Anyone remember afternoon papers? Okay, yeah. He wrote about him in a column after his death. Jim said, Frank's questioning technique had the willfulness of a hungry wolf. It was toothy and remorseless, and to the squirming bureaucrat who was being less than precise, rather terrifying. As an investigator, he combined the more urgent qualities of the big game hunter and the head of the Spanish Inquisition. I think that is fine praise for somebody who wanted to seek the truth. Yeah. So Frank was one hell of a reporter. Then he was promoted out of the ranks of reporting to become assistant city editor, then city editor. And I have to say, this is where kind of what Rachel was talking about comes in. His tough and very demanding style and expectation of excellence did not exactly endear him to everybody. Molly Ivins, the late great columnist, actually her first job was at the Minneapolis Tribune working for Frank, and she believed at the time that he was really driving half of the staff to alcoholism. She called him a picky son of a bitch, and I think I hated him when I worked for him, but I sure did learn a lot. Now, he was a character. He was fond of making funny faces and walking like an ape. He was known to walk by somebody holding an item of food in the newsroom and just taking a bite out of it. He would frequently jump up on the city desk and use this whip to issue commands to his troops like, get your copy in now, and I am I'm taking away the expletive that he would use. And I was going to say something really non-PC that he said about Molly Ivins' bra, but I'm scared now with Rachel there. Okay. But for all his antics and his boys club swagger, he was a journalist whose work inspired a public affairs reporting award, which continues to be one of Minnesota's reporters' most prestigious honors. Now, if Frank could be here as part of this discussion, I think he'd have some very good advice for us. But he can't be, so let me take my psychic powers and channel Frank for his words of wisdom based on his journalistic work and the way he lived his life. I think this is what Frank would want to share with us. First of all, embrace new ways of telling stories. I just found this out this summer. The Minneapolis Tribune first got into computer-assisted reporting back in the mid-1960s when they used the University of Minnesota computer to do a model of all the precincts in Minneapolis or in Minnesota for election analysis. So the value of using computers to do more complex data reporting was well proven, and the Tribune ended up investing in their own computer in 1967. Frank and another reporter used the company's computer in 1973 to delve into data about plea bargaining in the county court system. They were able to do it quickly enough to have their stories overlap with the running wire copy about a big story happening at the time, which was the plea bargaining of Vice President Spiro Agnew. So they were able to use this new technique to put a very interesting and important local hook on a national story. So I believe Frank, if he was still with us, he would have been all over anything that allowed journalists to get to the truth of a story more quickly and more completely. I think he would have been astounded by the array of resources and reporting tools available to journalists now, and who can even imagine what's coming next? I think some of the things that's really interesting are the sophistication of data visualization that really adds meaning and clarity to the muddle of complex stories, and the honing of precision journalism techniques to tease out stories from vast quantities of data. I think this is really going to be an important part of the future of journalism. Okay. Frank's second bit of advice, let's see. Build social networks the old-fashioned way. Now, Frank was a huge believer in the power of networking, but I think he might have been a little bit less than enthusiastic about the powerful grip that digital social networking has on today's journalists, as you can probably imagine from his command to get their asses out on the street. Frank understood that it was relationships that not only helped you in your reporting, but that were key to what he considered the ultimate goal for journalism, which was to help inform citizens and improve the community in which everyone lived. Frank believed in warm-blooded networking. He'd hang out at the Little Wagon after work with folks from the newsroom after the paper was put to bed. Everybody kind of hung out in those alcohol-fueled days. But he was also known for the salons that he held in his home. Cocktail parties to which he invited judges, officials, political party chairmen, the people who were often targets of his reporting. George Farr was one of the frequent invitees. He was chair of the Minnesota Democratic Party at the time. He described these gatherings to me in an interview earlier this year, and he said, it was an informal thing with a cross-section of people who were active in the community. Frank would have one when things were popping up politically. We'd get together and we'd talk about the issues. I asked him if he thought it was kind of awkward or weird that he was consorting, with the press. And he said this, which I think is, frankly, another important lesson for the future of journalism and for the present of journalism. George said, I was one of those people in politics who always admired the newsmen. They were professionals. There are so many political figures that think the news guys are out to get them, but I didn't feel that way. I thought they were just trying to do their job. I never lied to them, and nobody was ever unfair in their coverage of me. Now, obviously, Frank was very dogged in his reporting. He insisted on nothing less than the truth from his sources, but he realized it didn't have to be adversarial. He didn't believe in an us against them. He thought that everyone had a job to perform, and he just wanted to make sure everybody was doing their job for the good of the community. After Frank died, there was a memorial fund that was started by a group of his friends and colleagues, which included reporters, lawyers, the state attorney general, and the chairs of both the Republican and Democratic parties. They felt that the most fitting tribute to their friend would be to encourage journalists in the pursuit of public affairs reporting, and they established this award. So in the spirit of Frank's commitment to broad networking, the Premack Awards are one of the few, if not only, journalism awards judged not only by other journalists, but by a panel made up of activists, artists, business owners, politicians, and just plain citizens that the journalism is intended to inform. Excuse me. And finally, okay, build social networks the old-fashioned way. Finally, I think Frank would want to tell us that committing journalism is a lot of fun. He would want to remind us of that. Now, while there was certainly agreement that newsrooms in the past are now, or newsrooms now, are a lot healthier and certainly more diverse than in the smoke-filled, alcohol-fueled, largely white male bastions of the past. To a person, the people that I interviewed this summer waxed nostalgic about just how much they enjoyed the work. Sharing the purpose, a shared purpose with committed journalists, some of them were a little bit crazy, kind of like Frank. It was just plain fun. So I think Frank would be very happy to see this kind of crazed commitment to journalism in a job description that my nephew, Matthew Doig, wrote for an investigative reporter position that he was filling at the Sarasota Herald-Tribune. Matt put this out on the IRE listserv. They were trying to hire an investigative reporter. And part of it says, if you're the type of sicko who likes holing up in a tiny closed office with reporters of questionable hygiene to build databases from scratch by hand entering thousands of pages of documents, to take on powerful people and institutions that wish you were dead, all for the glorious reward of having readers pick up the paper and glance at your potential prize-winning epic as they flip their way to the jumble, well, if this sounds like journalism heaven, then you're our kind of sicko. Again, this got posted to the investigative reporter list. Somebody put it on their blog. Somebody else picked it up. And I was going to say it went viral, but I'm really kind of afraid of Jason. So everybody, it blew up. It blew up on the internet, right? Okay, so Mother Jones actually called it the best journalism job want to add ever. So what was very interesting about this is the comments that the job description got. They were largely from people saying, I wish that I could work at a place like that. One poster said about Matt and the job description, he said, he's the type of editor who will keep journalism alive. I wish I had seen an ad like this 4 years ago after working in numerous newsrooms that were as dead as roadkill. So, in closing, I would like to say, my advice for the future of journalism and for the clever, committed journalists who will be providing this vital community service is to seize the power of new techniques to tell compelling stories. Make sure that you develop your warm-blooded network as well as your virtual. And as Frank would have said, God damn it, go out and have some fun.